Welcome to One Week Critiques interview series, where we discuss the development of an individual piece of poetry or prose over time. I'm Ingrid Wenzler, an editor for One Week Critique, and this is Blanche McCrary Boyd, a novelist, journalist, essayist, and professor at Connecticut College, where she introduced me to fiction 17 years ago. Blanche is the author of 5 novels and a collection of autobiographical journalism, The Redneck Way of Knowledge. Her newest novel, Tomb of the Unknown Racist, completes the Blacklock Trilogy.
Yeah.
Tomb of the Unknown Racist is narrated by the same character as The Revolution of Little Girls and Terminal Velocity. Among the awards Boyd has received are a Guggenheim Fellowship, a National Endowment of the Arts Fellowship, a South Carolina Arts Commission Fellowship, and a Wallace Stegner Fellowship in Creative Writing at Stanford University. Her most recent book, the one we'll be focusing on today, Tomb of the Unknown Racist, was a 2019 PEN/Faulkner Award finalist. Hi, Blanche, welcome.
Hi, it's really nice to see you. I have so many cool students out there now, former students. You all grew up, you know?
Yeah, thank you, and you're pretty cool yourself.
I remember my shock when I began to realize my students didn't remember the Vietnam War.
You're reading Tim O'Brien and they're looking a little baffled.
What?
So let's get started here. Your most recent book, The Tomb of the Unknown Racist, is the third in a trilogy. It's a novel, and one that can be read on its own or out of the trilogy's set order, but that's richer, more complicated, and tender, I think, if it's read after The Revolution of Little Girls and Terminal Velocity. Your books are about so many things. They're about what happens to your main character, Ellen the Rain, or Rain, and later about the action Ellen takes. They're about race, class, gender. They're about kinship, the families we form for ourselves and the families we're born into. And they're a lot about searching. Could you say a little bit about your trilogy, Blanche, just to help viewers get situated?
Sure. Sure, I guess. You know, here, our lives are all middle. Our lives, that's how we live. Our lives are all middle. And so when you impose a form on a story, which is this happened, then this happened, and because of it, this happened, you're leaving out so much stuff, always. And so, for instance, the Revolution of Little Girls, there's one paragraph that refers to Ellen. She was living in a commune back then in Mendocino County, and her brother just mentions her brother. Her brother is a minor character, but living in the commune is like in one paragraph, and then in Terminal Velocity, it's like the whole book is basically what happened in that commune. So that interests me technically. I think writers do a lot of things that interest them technically that probably don't interest anybody else. It's like painting the inside of your closet. Okay, if you really want to see in the closet, yes, it's painted. Now my closet is not painted, but that's a metaphor. Okay, but things that you do just for the technical satisfaction of doing them. I'll tell you what gave rise to Terminal Velocity. The Revolution of Little Girls won the Lambda Award for lesbian fiction. And the only sexist in the book is a heterosexual scene where Ellen's trying to lose her virginity in a girdle, which is very funny. And so, I was kind of going around doing all these readings and everything. And so they would introduce me as the Lambda Award winner. And in some bookstore, I read that chapter. I don't know. So somebody raised her hand and said, when does Ellen come out? And I thought she meant like a debutante, you know, because I grew up with debutantes. So I said, come out? I said, she said, as a lesbian. I said, oh, Ellen already came out. This is a came out book. This isn't a come out book, which is exactly right. It's a came out book. But then I thought, all right, you want to know what all these women coming out in the 70s was really like? Let's tell that story. Let's tell that story. And it was based a little bit, I mean, I lived in a bunch of communes and it was very crazy. And I was very surprised to find out that a friend of mine was actually a fugitive. And I didn't know it until the FBI came to the health food store and arrested her. I thought her name was Shoshana and her name was Pat Swinton. And she was wanted with, I forget who the other person was. They were famous fugitives at the time. I had no idea. So that interested me a lot. And I was in an outdoor production of Alice in Wonderland, which was hilarious. And I did play a playing card as a to guide people, because all set up in a pasture. It was quite a thing. We wrote an original operatic score for it too.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't sing, thank God, but people did sing. And we had a giant table for the Mad Hatter's tea party, so that somebody dressed as the Mad Hatter could dance on it, and giant chairs, and it was a lot of fun. I did not take acid at that event, and which is what happens in the book. And the FBI agent who shows up, I did not go to college with. So a lot of stuff is made up. So part of what I'm trying to explain here is that, you know, what really happens in your life, especially if you've led as wild a life as I have, is a lot of raw material. You can just use it whatever way you want to tell a story. So I wanted to tell the story of what do you do when you find out, there you are tripping and you have 1 hour. You find out that your lover is actually a fugitive, and you either have to go underground with her and run, or you have to abandon her. That struck me as an interesting question. And given the politics of what was going on in the 70s, it was a real question. Jane Alpert, that's who was underground with Pat Swinton.
Okay.
And Alpert contacted Swinton through whatever ways they would all contact each other, and said that she was going to turn herself in. And Swinton knew that that meant they would be able to track her. So in other words, Alpert was doing a morally complicated thing because she was going to get Swinton caught. And nobody thinks about women as having these deeply moral questions and decisions that they have to make about that are going to affect whether somebody is going to make it or not, you know? And I was also very interested in children. Jordan had abandoned her child, go underground, and that sank her. That was the thing that sank her. She could not live with having done that. And that interested me, because lots of guys abandon their children, you know, it's like, really, I'm sorry, honey. But for a woman to abandon her daughter was really a terrible thing to live with for her. So I was interested in all that.
Tell us a little bit about Revolution of Little Girls and Terminal Velocity. Let's talk a little bit about Tomb of the Unknown Racist. What are some, like, kind of, you know, if you had to summarize it almost like Hollywood style, what happens in Tomb of the Unknown Racist?
Okay. Well, Ellen, the same Ellen from all these other crazy things, is now living with her mother, who has dementia, and taking care of her mother, and basically has retired from thinking about the world, which does get really tiresome to be involved in the world. And so her brother was a terrorist. He was a white right wing, the same brother from the earlier book, who was this wonderful guy, somehow became this terrorist, this white supremacist leader and terrorist, who was supposed to have died in 1984 in a shootout with a real group called the Silent Brotherhood. And he abandoned his Vietnamese partner and their daughter, Ruby, when he had this revelation that he was the leader of the extreme right and the savior of the white race, when he had that revelation. And so they had disappeared, and Ellen felt so guilty and horrible about everything. This is her brother, but she looked for the partner, whose name was Santain, who's Vietnamese, and the daughter Ruby. She looked for them, but not really hard. And then she just put it out of her mind. So there she is, taking care of her mother in South Carolina, in Charleston, where she can look out one window and see the tobacco factory where her mother had to quit high school and work when she was 13. And look at the other way and see the beautiful Ashley River Bridge and the water. And it turns out, all of a sudden, there's Ruby on television saying that her children have been kidnapped. She's now in her early 20s. Ellen knows instantly that that's Ruby because they look alike. And, Ruby has Asiatic features, darker skin, but it's a kind of doppelganger thing. And in fact, when she goes out to New Mexico, because they still think the kids have been kidnapped, to try to help Ruby, when she sees her, Ellen says, for a moment, I thought she would kneel, because because of the connection to her father. Mm. And so it's really about what happened to those children. I was very interested from Terminal Velocity, what happens when a mother doesn't know what to do about the children that she loves. I covered the Susan Smith trial in South Carolina. Susan Smith was a young woman from South Carolina who left her two kids in their car seats and rolled the car into a lake and then ran across the street and said her car had been hijacked by a black man. Her two white kids hijacked. So I covered all that. So I thought a lot about all of this. How could this happen? Susan Smith was not really a very interesting person. Just like Ruby is not really a very interesting person. She doesn't have a lot of what we would call agency now. She's somebody caught in these political and social machinations that just catch her, and it's like a hole opens and her children drop out of the world. That's what happens to her. And how does anybody take responsibility for something like that? What is Ellen gonna do about all of this? Her brother's still out there and he's still dangerous. What is her responsibility? And that's a question for all of us who are white. What is our responsibility about these white terrorists? Are we going to pretend they're somebody else's problem? Can Ellen just say, I'm not my brother's keeper? Or has she got to figure out how to stop her brother? Try to stop her brother. So that's the story. That's the story.
That's so eloquently put. And I mean, that sure is a question for all of us. So you've touched on this a little bit when it comes to Terminal Velocity and The Revolution of Little Girls, but how did you come to be a writer? And how did you come to write these books in particular? It sounds like from what you're saying, they're very question driven. That, I mean, these questions are almost still sort of live for you.
They are. Well, I think they're alive in American culture. What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a lesbian? All of this stuff is still very alive for me. I don't know what my responsibility is. I grew up in the extreme right wing. I grew up on a plantation. I grew up thinking that the Confederacy was the good guys. And I believed that with all my heart. So I'm still thinking about all this, of course. And, you know, I got a daughter who's 21 and a son who's 21. And my daughter, if I touch my daughter without permission, she jerks right away. I said, I really like it that you don't allow anyone to touch you without permission, even your mother. I don't know, how'd she get that? I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And there's my sweet, sweet son who is so charming and so accomplished and modest, you know. Anyway, of course, these are real questions, and they're real questions right now. And there's a way that, you know, after I finished the first two books, I didn't write for a long time. Terminal Velocity came out in 97. Our kids were born in the year 2000. And it just drove a truck over my career. I mean, I could not write. I was scheduled to go to China when they were a year old. And I was going to be one of the people to walk the bridge between China and Vietnam, the first people to walk this bridge. And I lost the ticket the night before I was supposed to leave. I lost the ticket. And we looked everywhere, and I had really lost the ticket. So I had to call up the woman I was going with, who was Vietnamese, and say, I can't do this. I felt such relief. It's the minute I said I can't do this, the relief I felt. I did not want to leave my children on this side of the world and be so far away when maybe if there was another emergency like 9/11, I couldn't get back to them. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it. And I didn't write anything for really a long time. And I seemed more and more successful. But I felt like a failure. I really did feel like a failure because I always knew that I really needed to address race. You cannot grow up as a white Southerner and not address race. When The Revolution of Little Girls came out, one of the interviewers said to me, can I just give you a compliment? He said, you're about the first white writer I've ever talked to who understands that they're white. You know, when I talk to my friends, I'll say white Americans, they'll say, can't you just call us Americans? No, because if you're going to say people and people of color, you've already said something insane. You've said something insane. It's like saying people and women. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. So if you're going to say people of color, you better learn to say I'm white and figure out what it means. And what is your responsibility about it? You know, we didn't cause slavery. We didn't cause all this damage structurally. You and I didn't cause it, but we're swimming in it.
Yeah, I'm living in the consequences of it.
And we don't know what to do about it. You know, I mean, white people really don't know what to do other than a lot of hand wringing, which is ridiculous, you know? And so I'm trying to figure out a way forward for me as an intellectual, which is, I think that people have got to stop thinking that everyone who voted for Trump is an idiot. Got to stop that. Try to figure out, what do they think? Why do they think it? Where can we start to we live in a bubble of liberalism up here, you know, and it's not the world. It's not the country. And so if white people can't start to talk to each other across this divide about race. We're heading for civil war. That's what my novel's about. We're heading for it. And this time it will be about race. And it won't be about anybody defending their territory. It'll be openly about race. And that is a nightmare thought. And you know, these really serious white extremists, they don't believe that Jews are white. They don't believe that Jews are people of color. They believe that Jews are people to exterminate. Now I'm talking about the really radical edge of this, okay? My wife and children are Jewish. It's like, I wanted our kid, and this to give you an idea of how long I've been worried about this. When we first started to talk about whether to raise the children in a temple, I said, absolutely. I want them always to know they're Jewish, because someday that may be a very dangerous thing to be, and they need to know that. So is that me being paranoid, or is that me being smart? I don't know. But let me just say one more thing here about these 3 novels and how they fit together. You know, the first novel deals with the plantation, growing up on that plant, which is such a nightmare. And the last novel is set, what, 20 or 30 years later, and the same issues are there. The same issues are there. And that's why I had to end the book the way I did. So can I just tell them how the book ends? Okay.
Yeah, let's get it out.
Well, actually, let me read the couple of paragraphs here that will tell them how the book ends. I always wanted to write a book with a coda. I think a coda is really cool. I remember it from when I took piano lessons, you know, and so a coda, you get to, I don't know. So this is a coda, and the action of the book is over, and this is in italics. So I'm just going to read the first couple of paragraphs because they matter here. Where any story begins is arbitrary, threads pulled and worried till a mat of events untangles or does not. But the end of any story is fixed. And then he died, and then she died, and then they all died. My own death will come in Greece, on the island of Naxos, in the waters on the west side, where I have discovered a sunken ruin. This will happen in the summer of 2001, 2 months before the World Trade Center falls from the sky. All right. Anyway, so she talks about Naxos, which is a very important place to me. But one of the great things about having a coda is I get to tell what happened to everybody after the story ends, and I get to hold forth a little bit. So this is me holding forth. I don't know whether individual stories can still matter, but I do know that if Ruby had not appeared on television claiming that her children had been kidnapped, if I had not recognized her immediately and thrown myself headlong into her life, if I had not searched for my brother and found him, I would never have attempted to write this account. Words that matter must be fitted hard against each other, like these stones made into a surface that can hold weight and power, and the result cannot simply be an empty frame. I hope this frame is not empty. I hope the story of what happened in my family matters, because after my death, the rise and organization of the white supremacists will continue. One more line here that I think matters about the meaning of the book. Ellen says, I still don't know whether my brother was evil or damaged or simply a twig floating on a river of historical events. That doesn't get settled. It doesn't get settled. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, one thing I love so much about the coda is, I mean, it's beautifully written, as is the rest of the book, but I mean, like you're saying, the voice shifts and we get to see like a little bit of thinking about fiction almost in a meta sort of way. And I think that really works there. Um, and changing gears a little bit. So, besides writing fiction, you've written The Redneck Way of Knowledge, a book of essays, and
I
some
just
journalism.
recorded it. Did you know I just recorded it for Audible?
You told me.
I got to change it, thank God, because there's things in it that really there's things that should have gone. It came out in 1980. It's 40 years old. And so, I mean, my essay, Growing Up Racist, what an outrageous thing for me to write in 1980 on the cover of the Village Voice. I mean, really, what, talk about a fist on the table. There it was, you know?
Yeah.
And about trying to leave the South and escape racism. And everywhere I went, there I found it. But, you know, doing what I do, but it felt great to record it. And they let me add kind of introduction about how I felt about recording it, and each piece as I got to it, why I wrote that piece. And it was just a great experience to record it, because after 40 years, that's still my voice. It really is. That's amazing. It's still my voice.
Oh, that's tremendous. I'm so glad you feel that way. And I mean, I have to say, I mean, being a former student of yours and listening to Terminal Velocity, I read the others with hard copy, but I listened to Terminal Velocity, and you know, I couldn't help wishing it's so well read, but I wanted to hear it in your voice
But
because
everybody says, and you know, I just didn't have the nerve. I really didn't have the nerve. But when it got to Redneck, it was like, nobody else reads this. No. I take the rap for this one. But yeah, I do wish I had recorded the other books now, because I feel much more confident about how to do that work, how to read a book. And I wasn't confident. They offered me the chance. I got to audition to record The Revolution of
oh,
One.
that's too much. Um, so thinking about the Redneck Way of Knowledge, do you think gonzo journalism sort of coming out of Tom Wolfe's overcoat helped you with your fiction and helped prepare you for a book
Absolutely.
that's, you know, really thoughtfully researched, like Tomb of the Unknown Racist?
Writing for the Village Voice, I discovered that when I was writing in the first person, people believed anything I said. They believed and I could tell a story in exactly the way English professors had been trying to stop me from doing, which is like, I'm all about the periphery. Like, what I'm good at, Ingrid, I see the fucking elephant in the room and I just say so. That's really all. It's like, if the Pope is giving mass in Yankee Stadium and the altar is on second base, am I supposed to report that straight? I mean,
No.
I wrote this crazy piece about baseball, Catholicism, and sex. And, you know, it was like, it almost felt like every time the voice would let me do something, I would try to see, what can I wrote about the Spoleto Festival. I wanted to see if I could get 2,000 words in without mentioning a performance. And I did. And when I recorded it, I cut some things out about the performances, because who cares about the performances? What matters is the characters I'm writing about.
Yeah.
And the milieu of that kind of high culture of the Spoleto Festival, and my redneck opinion of it, and my aristocrat friends who I was hanging around with. And you know, when that book was reissued, it came out in 81, and then it was reissued in 96 or 7, with a new introduction by Dorothy Allison. I was like, whoa. And I said to my editor, you know, I always thought if we reissued this book that I would want to add an essay about drugs and alcohol and my regret that I felt like I had glamorized them in this book. And there was a silence, and she said, "Oh, well, Blanche, I got to tell you, you can do that if you want to, but I don't think you make drinking and drugs look very good." So, well, I'm sober now. I've been sober, I'll be 39 years in May. So it's like having two different lives. I had one life on one side of that and a whole different life on this side of it. I still continued to have adventures. I was 5 years sober when a magazine sent me to Peru to be initiated by a shaman. You know, it's amazing what people will let you do if you just say you want to do it. So I call up Cosmopolitan. Are you guys interested? I'd like to learn skydiving. You guys want me to write a piece? You think you have readers who are interested in how to learn skydiving? Yes, actually, we think we do have readers who would be interested. The Voice let me see. My first two novels were not in the first person. And I was doing something that's become much more common now, trying to write from different points of view so that you saw a situation from several points of view. And because that really interested me at that time. But when I started writing for The Voice, people would say to me, "I love the stuff you write, but you do make this stuff up, don't you?" I would say, "No, I'm just describing the elephant in the room over and over. That's all." But I could use that. Ellen's voice is very much like the voice in The Redneck Way of Knowledge. But it's a story. A story's being told. Whereas in The Redneck Way of Knowledge, that voice is a reporter, and that voice is me. But I'm connecting all kinds of crazy stuff, If I'm going to go to a stock car race, why can't I connect that to Kundalini yoga?
So Blanche, another question for you. James Wood says literature differs from life in that life is amorphously full of detail and rarely directs us toward it, whereas literature teaches us to notice. And this tutoring is dialectical. Literature makes us better noticers of life. We get to practice on life itself, which in turn makes us better readers of literature, which in turn makes us better readers of life, and so on. I'm wondering if some of your encounters and journalistic trips have done something similar for you, sort of helped you notice life's peculiarities.
I was always noticing the wrong things from early on.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when I took English at Duke, I didn't understand what they were talking about. They want me to write a paper taking images of color and light in William Faulkner's short story, Wash, and write an essay about it. Why? Why should I be remotely interested in writing about that? What I wanted to write about and couldn't imagine yet was how reading Wash made me feel. How reading That Evening Sun, one of the most powerful stories I've ever read, made me feel. As if my body was a tuning fork that was just, my spine was just vibrating completely from that story. I can't even teach that story. It is so hideous what the racism that he is describing in such a dispassionate way. It's just, I can't teach it, Every once in a while I will. I mean, and man, would it be a trigger now? It would be I wouldn't teach it in the political climate right now. But I was always noticing the wrong things, and everything is detail. Everything is detail. A word is an abstraction. Language does not come from the side of the brain that storytelling comes from. The side of the brain that storytelling comes from is the side of the brain that dreams. Language comes from the same side of the brain as math. If I say desk, It's already an abstraction. Think about how many different desks you've seen. What specific desk are we talking about? Everything is in the actual detail and what the detail reflects. So you're not only looking for details, you're looking for details that have numinosity, that have charge, that have some kind of freight with them. So every detail has got to have some kind of freight, and then you're making the picture out of those details. And when you make the picture out of details that have freight, you get a very interesting, complicated view. And that's what I see. So it's what I want to do. My son said, he has a professor now. He said, "Mom, she's like you. Her mind just seems to move laterally."
Your mind does move laterally.
It does. It's like, well, yeah. I mean, order is something we impose.
I know.
Something we impose. It is not there. It is not there. So
I think one thing I loved about being in class with you was, I mean, your classes always felt to me like I was kind of living a short story, like there was a beginning, a middle, and an end, and also like we were all in this sort of dream state. And
I think that's
yeah,
right. Now I'm teaching over Zoom. I got to, let me tell you something I did in my class last night. I said, I never do sort of actual things. I said, I want you all to get out a piece of paper. I bet you all know how to write the numbers for 1 million. So I want you to write down 1 million. Now, I want you to change that to 100 million. And now I want you to move that one over so that we're talking about 1 billion. Okay? Now I want you to keep moving it till we get to 1 trillion. Okay? Now, where you wrote 1, I want you to erase that and put 400. Because I want to tell you what the odds are of you being born. 1 in 400 trillion.
Oh, wow.
That are the odds of you being born. Genetics is a serious crapshoot. We have no idea what we inherit. You know, language is like a twig floating along, a consciousness like a twig floating on a river. What's the river? We don't know. And, you know, we can tell history from the point of view of the powerful. We can tell history from the point of view of the people who aren't powerful. And you get a really different take on history. A Marxist historian has a very different view of what happened to the Native Americans in this country from an Americanist, just a different view. So that, all that stuff about point of view, where are we looking from? And if it's that rare, Ingrid, for you to get born, then you arrive here with a task. You arrive here with a shape, just like a blade of grass can crack a sidewalk. I mean, that's what that force is. The force that through the green fused shoots, Dylan Thomas, well, it'll crack a sidewalk. And so every person has something in them that's like that, that's trying to take shape, that's trying to take form. And we're all in this together. Those of us who do art, like you and me, or writing, it's like I said earlier, you can think of it like this broad highway of people who believe in art. And we're all doing our piece of it, of paving this thing. And we can look over and I can say, "Hi, Ingrid." You can say, "Hi, Blanche." Or, "Hi, George Saunders." Or, "Oh, Faulkner, wow, look at you back there." You know, I mean, you can do that. But we're paving one thing. And if you believe in art, art is like something swimming in the ether. It's up there and it's fixed. It's fixed. It's fixed in a way that our lives are not. The still vase turning in the stillness. I can't remember. Something like that. And I thought, boy, I know exactly what that means, you know? And that's if it's really good, that's what it does. That's what it does.
All that's so well put. And, I mean, I think that's so much of what your work is doing. I want to turn back to the coda, to Tomb of the Unknown Racists, and the word in it that you changed over and over again.
I had to look when we talked. I had to look to see which word I ended up with.
So we usually have writers read their work twice. Since you've changed just one word, I'm going to see if you'll read us the final version and then spend some time telling us about the other words you tried, or just about what changing that word for you was all about.
Okay. Estelle offers me the opportunity to spend the night in her blue room, a cabin just large enough to contain a double bed, an armchair, and a desk. She lights a kerosene lamp and leaves me there, surrounded by indigo walls and a pale blue floor and ceiling. Even the window shades are blue. I've never let anyone sleep in here but Dan, she says. I doubt she ever tells Dan that we were once more intimate friends. Not long after the New Millennium Party, I will begin to pretend that I can't speak at all, and I will converse only with my dog, whose name I sometimes forget. And for the next year and a half, I will live quietly in my hexagonal house on the Isle of Palms as I write out this account. I do not remodel my house, and I forget entirely about the alarm system because I am no longer angry or afraid. I am, in fact, oddly happy, serene, at peace, which seems like God's final joke. In the summer of 2001, I will return to Naxos, where I will be floating in salty water when the third stroke comes, staring down at the tightly fitted stones, and I will drift for several hours before anyone discovers I am gone.
So Blanche, I get a chill hearing it in your voice. Thank you. You read so well. I mean, one question I have about this, besides the word change thing, is you said in our email chain before this interview that your novels haven't required much in the way of line editing, but they have often involved shifting what you called your internal positioning about the work.
Yeah. Yeah, and when something is off in a piece that I've written, it's because my positioning about it, whatever place in myself I'm looking from, it's not adjusted right.
Mm.
It's not adjusted right. So in an earlier version of this book, this was the first time I really made a big change in a book because of something an editor said. He said, look, people have followed Ellen, who seems so outrageous and over the top, all over the country, chasing after her brother. They are not going to believe that she finds him in this religious cult underground in Montana, which was how I had imagined it. Because I was very interested in this religious cult that built an underground cabin in Montana, Paradise Valley, that would have housed like 1,000 people for 2 years. So I thought that'd be an interesting place to set something. And he said, I don't believe that's what Royce is doing.
Mm.
And he said, do you really think Royce isn't dangerous? I said, well, in that, in the underground thing, he has a private army. He said, it's not believable what you've done. It's not believable. And because I didn't believe the private army either. I didn't really believe the underground thing. And that's what I mean by my inner positioning was off. I did not want to face who Royce really was.
Mm.
or what he might try to do to Ellen. I did not. He wanted to see Ellen. He found her. He wants her to convert to what he thinks. They have an argument about Stalin. I mean, he said, there's nobody else I know who would quote Stalin. And, and you can tell he's got something horrible planned. He might have a nuclear bomb. He might have a major poisoning thing going. We don't know. There's a lot of stuff he could have been doing. And I lay the groundwork for a lot. It looks like there's a lot of stuff he was planning. And, but he wants Ellen there for the same reason he wanted Ruby there. He doesn't want them to die in what he's going to do. He cannot separate what is personal for him, not really. And so, he has himself knocked out, and then his guy drug Ellen, feeding her breakfast. Ellen's a sober alcoholic. It is not a good idea to drug Ellen.
No, it's not. I worried for her in that moment.
Well, and they set her up to drink. They have a bottle of booze sitting on the table when she manages to get back in the other room, and she has no idea what's happened. She knows that Royce's wheelchair gets overturned. She knows that she poured the alcohol on the fire. If you pour alcohol on a fire, it will travel up the alcohol. So it's not going to put the fire out. It's going to light the alcohol. And so she sets the house on fire. It's very puzzling why Royce's person pulled her out of the fire instead of Royce. That is just left mysterious. Ellen will never know. She has 2 missing days. She never tells them about the woman who took her there or the suitcase. She pretends she can't talk. She pretends she has amnesia. She pretends a bunch of things. She's just not going there anymore. And she feels so guilty about causing her brother's death, And then that old woman from the prison, isn't the nun cool? The lesbian nun. Oh, she's fabulous.
So before we get too far from the coda, tell us about the word that you changed.
I kept changing the last line. I kept rewriting the last paragraph, but I will drift for several hours before anyone discovers I am gone. Now let me read this, just the last 2 lines here with the word changed.
Please.
In the summer of 2001, I will return to Naxos, where I will be floating in salty water when the 3rd stroke comes, staring down at the tightly fitted stones, and I will drift for several hours before anyone discovers I have gone. To say I have gone is very different from saying I am gone. And I couldn't decide which one I meant because they have different implications. If she says, before anyone discovers I have gone, that gives Ellen an agency in her death, as if she chose to die at that moment. I don't know if I believe that. And it also comes across as a little angry. I have gone. I'm fucking through with you people. I'm gone. But I am gone. It's like, she's been disappearing, stopping talking, everything. And now she's gone. I am gone. Yeah. So it was a big change. And I kept flipping back and forth. I wanted Ellen to have more agency, but I knew it had to take it away.
I hear that. I think I am gone sounds so much gentler to my ear. I hear what you're saying about the agency, and I think it even fits the content that comes before in terms of her sort of drifting away, but all of the things that she's so attentive to beforehand. I mean, I think give her a margin of that agency that you're looking for.
I think so too. And there's a deliberateness with which she has stopped talking.
Yeah.
She only quotes AA slogans. She is considered very wise. I have to say, I suspect I am too. Okay. Because I've been sober so long.
Yeah.
And, things get to be cliches because they're good ideas. That's how things get to be cliches.
You always said that in class, and I always repeat it because I think it's so true.
Yeah, I loved what you reminded me that cleaning up language is like cleaning off the windshield. So you can actually see the story. Where's it going? Um, Extraneous details, extraneous words, stuff that doesn't have freight, that doesn't carry that shimmer. It has to come out. I mean, sometimes you really got to have a line or two like that because you got to move people out of a room or move them somewhere. I hate that part where I got to just not try for that shimmer in the language.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about Royce as well and this idea of internal positioning. I'm sure you've heard of Stanislavski's system, what most of us call method acting.
Yeah.
Do you ever use that approach loosely as a writer? Like when you were skydiving to do research for terminal velocity, were you sometimes skydiving as Ellen?
No, I mean, I learned skydiving before I started writing these novels.
Okay.
And, I started skydiving when I was 33. I had the idea that Jesus died at 33, and I was going to outlive Jesus and achieve terminal velocity the same year. So that's really crazy. That's really crazy. I mean, I'm still drinking. And I mean, I don't mean that I never did anything else crazy, but
Yeah, we all have our moments, sober and not.
I tell you what was really hard was to enter Royce's head
Yeah.
and try to understand, make it believable what had happened to him, and draw out the class separation that happened with him and his friend. Because there's Royce, he goes to private school, and there's his friend who goes to public school where all the racial trouble is happening. And Royce gets a really good draft number and his friend doesn't. And his friend becomes this white extremist,
Yeah.
survivalist. And I think it's either the FBI or the ATF that asks Royce to go infiltrate through his friend this group, the Silent Brotherhood. And
I can't remember which either.
yeah, but then it doesn't matter. It's not a detail that matters. The point is, he went there thinking he was going to get his friend out, and instead, something happened to him. Now, what happened to him? A lot of people have extreme religious experiences. If you've read Varieties of Religious Experience, or if you've ever had a big spiritual experience, they can be life-changing. And when somebody comes out of that, they're very open to somebody else's interpretation of what it is. And if I remember correctly, the guy who wrote the Turner Diaries is sitting beside Royce when Royce comes out of his unconsciousness after where he has no memory of, he's screaming, "I am the one, I am the one, I am." He has no memory of it. What happened to him? And I mean, here he is. He's with this Vietnamese woman, and he has a biracial daughter who he was already a survivalist. I mean, they were living out in the woods, and he tried to deliver his daughter himself. And it was really hard to write Royce's position papers, and I just couldn't go far into them. I couldn't, and I knew I had to make them not sound ridiculous. That's like, oh, really? I really want to write this stuff. Can I even go there in my head? You know.
Yeah,
So
I find the acting stuff really interesting. Like an actor like Daniel Day-Lewis who inhabits characters and doesn't break with character. But I mean, I think, whether that's something you're doing as a fiction writer or not, how you're thinking about it, you are always accessing characters and trying to think like they think and
yeah,
put yourself literally in their shoes.
yeah.
And I mean, I think, yeah, what a challenge to have the questions that you do about Royce, but to try to think like Royce and write like Royce.
Well, I mean, my upbringing represents a lot of what's happening in the country right now.
Yeah.
You know, in 1986, my mother sent me a Confederate flag for Christmas. It's a huge Confederate flag with a certificate of authenticity that it was flown over the South Carolina State House before the flag was taken off the Capitol. What the fuck am I supposed to do with this? I mean, I don't know. I called my mother. I said, why did you do this? And she said, it's history, honey. Your cousin Glenn, he was the president pro tem of the Senate.
Mhm.
He negotiated the compromise that got the flag moved off the Capitol and onto the Capitol grounds. That was the first cut. But after the shootings at the church in Charleston, it went off the Capitol grounds entirely. But what a big fight in South Carolina to get rid of that flag. And so here I am with a certificate of authenticity. I have a lot of thoughts about it. Sometimes I think, let's just take it out on the green at Connecticut College and set it on fire. But we could draw violence toward the school if we do that. Kate Rushin, a fabulous poet who wrote a poem called This Bridge Called My Back, told me that there's a Black artist who works with Confederate flags and that maybe I should send it to him. But I feel like the fact that I don't know what to do with the flag is showing me that there's some level on which I still don't know what to do with my past, and I don't know what I'm responsible for. I think more and more I am responsible for trying to bridge this gulf between white anti-racists, and I am one, an absolute anti-racist, between being a white anti-racist member and supporter of Black Lives Matter, how to cross that gulf to these people I grew up with who are out there, carrying flags for Trump. When Trump said early on that if he went out in the street and shot somebody, his followers wouldn't care, that wasn't a metaphor. That was true. That was true. And a lot of the people who led this insurrection understood, to the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. They knew exactly what was happening.
You've taught at Connecticut College for over 30 years. And, yeah,
Next year. It'll
congratulations.
be 40 years when I retire, 40.
40. Oh, wow.
I used to think a person with a real job was a sellout. I really did. Why would anybody have the same job over and over?
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, you used to say to all of us as students that you would stay on our shoulders, that we would continue to hear you. And
Right.
I do. And I think about things that you said in class all the time. This business of, I'm working with other writers on a project that's largely about revising. I think of your cleaning the windshield metaphor all the time. And I also think of your metric about fiction that was so basic but so smart. Is it good and doesn't matter?
There you go. Those are the only questions we need to ask.
So thank you, Blanche, so much for joining me and for all of
Wonderful to see you. It's wonderful to see you.
Yeah,
It's,
likewise.
it makes me really happy.
As a final question, where can viewers find your work?
Well, I have a what do you call it? A website that some smart people set up, and it's BlancheMcCraryBoyd.com. And my books are on Amazon. They're all on Audible. And in any independent bookstore, you can order my books. They're all in print. Please don't order Mourning the Death of Magic or Nerves, because I took a look at them. They're not as bad as I thought. They're actually, Mourning the Death of Magic is better than I thought, but they're very weird.
Well, viewers will be forewarned, but don't take Blanche too seriously. It's wonderful. So thanks so much.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. Stay in touch with me, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.